as a young guide, especially, say you're in your late teens, early 20s, you're getting into it and you might be a pretty proficient hunter yourself, but there comes a point where you're going to have a client who's absolutely a better hunter than you just because of the 30 years of experience that they have on top of you. They may not know that exact game animal, but they've been there and done that in similar situations. And the one thing that I always tell everybody is do not let your hunter outhunt you.
My father gave me Montana.
Howdy, everybody. Welcome to the Empty Spaces Outfitters Beyond the Grid Adventures podcast. Today, I have Tyler O'Brien. He is an outfitter in Alaska. He's an overall great guy. And I decided to bring him onto the podcast because somebody, for one, told me that I should, but two, we haven't had an actual Alaskan outfitter on here before. And we just want to figure out who this guy is. Right, Tyler? Who this guy is and see what makes him special, makes his business special, and how beginners can get out in the world of the outdoors, maybe even get an outfitting expedition or guided tour. I don't know. I don't know what you guys do. But without further ado, Tyler O'Brien, over to you. Who are you? What's your story?
Clarify one thing here. I'm an outfitter in the state of Wyoming. Currently, right now, just a licensed guide in Alaska. Will be testing for my registered guide's license in Alaska in December of this year. So, all of my previous experience in Alaska has been working underneath another outfitter. But to kind of start with, born and raised in kind of all over Wyoming, north central, western, kind of all over in there. Um, and Graduated high school. Really haven't done a whole lot other than hunt and ranch work, a little bit of oil field work here and there. But I've found a way to do what I love and been able to make a living hunting professionally for just about my entire adult life. Um, so yeah, no, started guiding hunts in Wyoming over 10 years ago, 10, 12 years ago, 13 years ago, something like that. And the years kind of get away from you. But started doing that and just wanted to, found out that I liked it uh, and wanted to see how everybody did it differently to where I could take the good and the bad, from each outfitter, work for everybody that I could find, work for a lot of different ones, and then kind of mold that together into what my business now currently is. And it worked out pretty good. I mean, I've had my own business. This will be my fifth year running my own hunts, and it's it's been really good. Met a ton of incredible people from all over the world. In Alaska, I've taken guys from Denmark, Germany. I've guided in Idaho and Montana as well. Had guys from New Zealand, Australia, kind of all over the world. France. Um, Gosh, there's probably more. A guy from India, actually, one guy from India, which was kind of odd. You don't see a lot of Indian hunters, but that was really interesting. It's fun, meeting the different people from all these different cultures across the world and kind of learning their stories and their backgrounds. And that's something that I really enjoy is just talking to people and learning how they do things. They're different rituals, if you will. Uh, the Europeans, for example, are real, they've got a set kind of, I guess, a ritual, a protocol, to honor the animal after the harvest. It's a little different than what we do, but interesting all the same.
When you clarified in the beginning the difference between an outfitter and a guide, you said that you're a guide in Alaska and an outfitter in Wyoming. What's the difference for somebody who doesn't know? Like, I don't know.
So the difference, is so as a guide, there's so in Wyoming there is licensed guides and then there's licensed outfitters, and the guides have to work for the outfitters. So basically, you get your outfitter's license and then you employ guides to then work underneath you, and basically you're managing them. I'm still out in the field in Wyoming over 50% of the time. I'm still guiding, I'd say over 50%, if not more, of the hunts myself for my own business. I've got a handful of guys that help me out. I think you talked to Luke originally, and he's a great guy, probably the best guy that I've hired to this date. He's a real asset to my business. We get along well, and that's what you kind of have to do. You have to find someone who you've got a lot of commonalities with, and you agree on, legal issues, and you see eye to eye. I mean, you're taking these guys essentially on what I call a working vacation. They're coming out, they're paying you. They're not just paying for that 3 days or 5 days or 6 or 7 days, however long their trip may be. They're not just paying you for that. They're paying you for all the years of experience before that and the know how to go, you know, get things done effectively, efficiently, and safely. And so, I'm not just going to hire some Joe Blow off the street. We like to, get to know somebody and make sure that we're on the same page. That way I prevent any future blowups in the field if something were to happen, and I'm not there to manage directly. These guys are essentially kind of sort of independent contractors, working under my license. Um, and so that's what I've been doing in Alaska, working as what's called an assistant guide up here. And assistant guides work for registered guides. And a registered guide is just a different way of saying an outfitter. So as an assistant guide, you cannot contract your own hunts. So you have to work underneath someone else as a that is a registered guide.
Do you think that I guess bureaucracy is worth it? Do you think that actually saves a lot of time and energy for the outfitters, or what do you think about that whole process?
I think it's good. The hoops that you have to jump through and the benchmarks that you have to reach to become a registered guide in Alaska, you have to work as an assistant guide for 5 years underneath a registered guide before you're eligible to then get your own registered guides slash outfitters license in the state. You have to have um what is it? I think it's 70% favorable reviews from any 12 clients that they call that you've been on contract with. You have to have X amount of successful hunts, successful harvests in your hunts. You have to do a video of yourself doing all the cape prep on an animal. So after the animal's harvested, you've got your trophy. Everybody wants to, shoulder mount it, full body mount it, whatever that may be. You have to fully skin the animal from start to finish on video. You have to pull all the bones out of the toes, all the way, like say it's a bear, you got to go all the way to the claws. You got to pull all that out. You got to pull the skull out. And then you have to uh, do all the taxidermy prep work, because we're doing a lot of this stuff remote. We're in the middle of nowhere, Alaska. We're flown in hundreds of miles from any road. And obviously we don't have freezers. We don't have any way to preserve anything other than salt. And so you have to taxidermy prep all of these capes. So you got to turn the ears, skin the inner eye out. You've got to, like I said, pull the toes, turn the lips, and then salt that hide. That way, it's shelf stable so that it can get shipped back to an expediter and then go to a tannery and then shipped to, whatever taxidermist they decide to use. Um, so anyways, you got to meet all of these different criteria to be eligible to do that. Then you have to take a test, a written test. I think it takes 8 hours. You have to sit in front of a proctor board and do a in person. They ask you questions back and forth. And you have to prove your knowledge of the area. They give you a test on the knowledge of the areas that you're testing for. I mean, Alaska is a huge place. It would take 10 lifetimes to even come close to looking at it all. And so before they just allow you to go out with clients and say, yeah, good luck, see you later, bye. They make sure that you're aware of the country, the surroundings, you know, all the main rivers, which direction they flow, the closest emergency services, just to make sure that you're qualified to where if something were to happen, chances are everything's going to be okay. You've got to be first aid and CPR certified. Wilderness first responder is preferred, but not a must. But they just want to make it safe and efficient and make sure people aren't getting, ripped off because these guys are going out there, like I said, on a what I call a working vacation. They know that they're spending money. They're out there to have fun, but they're also going to have to work potentially extremely hard. Some of these hunts they're not sit in a blind and have 3 meals a day cooked for you. It's putting on a backpack and making some miles.
Do you think that those people who book, let's say with you, or more or less any outfitter or guide, do you think that those people know what they're getting into when they book their hunt?
Most of them are pretty good. With the technology that we have anymore, they're looking at the social medias, they're looking at websites, they're talking to people, and honestly, word of mouth seems to be the best advertising uh, for most of the guys that I know, anyways. But we get we'll book a hunter or two off social media. We'll get some organic just internet searches. Guys will find us like that. But the best ones are, hey, I talked to so and so maybe at an outdoor show, or they know them personally and they say, hey, they said that they had a great time. Everything was as good as it could be, and I just want to book the hunt with you. This is what I want to hunt. And what's our next step? Those always seem to be the best guys because they've spoken to people individually and had, real conversations about it, asked all their questions. And, some guys have a whole laundry list of questions that they ask you when they book. And some guys, they kind of go in blind, but I try to give them a pretty good overview of what should be expected. And the best thing that I've found, this is what I tell every client. And to go back just a little bit, when you first start, you kind of you think about all these things and you worry about things. You have your first contracted hunter for your own business, and you don't sleep at night. I used to have such a hard time sleeping the first night before a hunt. Man, I'd be up all night and thinking about what if this happens, what if this happens, and it's all these things that I can't control are the things that worry you. And what I've really kind of narrowed it down to is I'm going to control the things that I can control, and I'm not going to worry about the rest. The things that I can control is we can have a good hunting area. We can wake up early in the morning like we're supposed to. We can stay in a nice place. We can eat good food. We can have a good attitude, and we can try as hard as we possibly can. I can have good qualified guides that are going to do everything in their power, no matter what, to make your hunt a success. The things that I can't control is the weather and the game movements. And I don't worry about those things. Control what you
So,
can control and just don't worry about the rest of it because it's not going to do you any good in the long run.
and so it goes kind of back to what you said is really getting good guides. It seems like is critical in your business. And if you were going to tell if you're going to tell a 16-year-old kid who wanted to be a guide to start, right? If you're going to tell them how to become a good guide, where would they start? What would they need to start doing in order to prepare them for that lifestyle? Let's say you took a kid off the streets in New York City. What would you tell him?
Oh, we have that happen. Definitely. Um, so one of the criteria for getting your assistance guides license in Alaska is you have to be a packer for 2 seasons before you're eligible to get that license. And then that that outfitter has to sign off and say that yes, you're qualified to start working. And we get a lot of guys that are, I mean, they could be from Kentucky, they could be from New York, they could be from, I mean, anywhere. And in fact, we had an Amish kid a couple of years ago that came out, and he wanted to step away from their part of the world, their way of doing things, and try things out, and maybe go back. You know how that whole deal works. And yeah, I mean, rode his first airplane and did everything that he'd never experienced before, and he turned out to be a pretty good hand. Um, but nobody's ever going to be good at anything the first time you try it. You got to be willing to suck, but you got to be willing to learn at the same time. Have a good attitude and understand that you don't know everything, and nobody does, for that matter. I mean, there's if you're not learning every day, then you're not doing something right. Um, have an open mind, have a good attitude, and just work hard and try to be a decent person is just 90% of it. Find an outfitter that is a kind person. Number one, I've worked for guys that were not so nice. Um, they run off more good help than they've ever had because they're hard to deal with. Um, from the business owner standpoint, from management side, you got to understand that everybody has their own personal issues and their own problems, their own battles that they're going through, and so you got to be a little bit understanding with that. But also at the same time, there's a work and social life separation that needs to happen as well. You know, um, if if it's not something that needs to be taken care of immediately, if the decision can be put off for a couple of days or a week or whatever, you got to be able to put that aside because I mean, quite honestly, most of these people that are coming out, they're leaving stuff at home too. They're leaving jobs undone. They're thinking about what's going on at work in 2 weeks when they get back. Quite honestly, most of them really don't care that, you know, maybe your roof is leaking. Well, you know what? Their roof leaked too, and they still went to work and they got the job done. And so you got to be able to have that workplace slash social life separation. One thing that I've seen in recent years with the development of technology is we've got inReaches, so we have satellite communication. Um, and that's super handy to have. It's great. It's fantastic. It really is for just coordinating logistics and stuff when you're out in the field when you're not in cell phone coverage. But at the same time, now every young guide has an inReach and they're texting their friends and they're texting their girlfriends and they're texting their family and they're texting each other. And what I kind of don't really like is everybody's got an inReach strapped right here on their backpack and then they got their phone and they're just sitting there all day long. And it's like, hey, buddy, these guys aren't paying you. They're not paying me. And then I'm paying you to sit there and talk to your buddies. Like you need to be able to go to work and actually be at work.
We're coming out with a book. It's called The Wild Edge. And a lot of what you're talking about gets addressed in that, and that there is no separation anymore from technology to the point where you can be in the middle of the Alaskan wilderness and you're still in touch. And I don't necessarily think that it's a healthy thing for people to experience. So do you establish rules for your guides for cell phone usage?
You know, Not any like real set rules. I mean, the only real rules that we, I guess, set is everybody signs a guide contract when they show up, and basically it says, I agree to work for you for X amount, blah 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 blah. I agree to follow any landowner lease rules. I agree to not violate any state, federal, or game laws during my employment with O'Brien Creek Outfitters LLC, blah blah blah. That's really all that we have for like true, set rules. But the one thing that I tell people is it's an interesting concept of, guiding people because sometimes you get the brand new guy that's never been there before. He's never done anything like this in his entire life. This is his so-called maiden voyage out into the woods. And so they don't really know what to expect. But at the same time, you also get these guys, especially in Alaska, that are very proficient hunters. They've hunted all over the world. They've been there, they've done that. And as a young guide, especially, say you're in your late teens, early 20s, you're getting into it, and you might be a pretty proficient hunter yourself, but there comes a point where you're going to have a client who's absolutely a better hunter than you, just because of the 30 years of experience that they have on top of you. They may not know that exact game animal, but they've been there and done that in similar situations. And the one thing that I always tell everybody is do not let your hunter out hunt you. They might spot game, you're going to spot game. They might spot more than you, but have an open line of communication with them and don't be sitting there on your cell phone, texting whoever, your girlfriend on your inReach while they're behind the glass. That's a really bad look. I mean, these Alaska hunts, they can get pretty spendy. I mean, you're spending tens of thousands of dollars. And boy, it's you can't let that line get crossed.
Do you see it more with the new generation, like the Gen Z guides, or do you see it with millennials? Or I assume everybody's got the problem.
Yeah, everybody does. The older guides generally aren't too bad. If they're 30 plus, generally not quite as bad. It seems like about 26, 27 and under. Those guys are on their phones a lot. Not all of them, but I think it kind of depends on how they grew up. If they're farm and ranch raised guys, they generally seem to be a little more disconnected from the technology and whatnot. But yeah, there's definitely it's noticeable.
And to kind of reverse back off of the cell phone topic, but if I was, let's say I was going to book with you today, and I had told you that I had never hunted before in my life, and I told you that I wasn't comfortable with shooting, how would you treat me? What does that process look like?
Same as everybody else, really. I mean, we'd talk about obviously options first. We'd probably pick something pretty simple. Kind of we'd probably discuss finances a little bit, like how much are you willing and comfortable to spend? How much time do you have to spend? And do you currently own a firearm? Are you proficient with one? Have you ever been around them? Are you comfortable around them? And obviously, if you're not comfortable, proficient, don't own one, you should probably go take a class. Number one, you have to have hunter safety. That's a requirement in the state of Wyoming. And honestly, I think I believe it's a requirement everywhere. Um, but you need to understand the function of a firearm. I've had some near misses in the past with, safety issues, and I've almost been shot by two clients, like very nearly shot. Both were discharged. Um, one of them was a complete mistake. One of them was some really bad decision making, to put it simply. Um, I want you to be able to tell me the definition of a safety on a firearm. I want you to tell me the 10 rules of gun safety. You need to know those intimately. I mean, I learned that. I took hunter safety when I was, I don't know, 8 years old, 9 years old. It was actually a requirement in the school that I went to in grade school. Everybody took it that I went to school with for 10 years before that, and probably 5 years after it. They've since got rid of that class. But anyways, we discuss, like, what are you in it for? Like, let's go out and show you how to get some good, super healthy, incredibly tasty table fare. Like maybe we'd go cow elk hunting. Low stress, lots of animals, you know, we're not worried about missing our opportunity on a great big giant trophy bull or something. It's like, hey, if that opportunity, if we mess something up, hey, so be it. It's not the end of the world. Or maybe an antelope. Antelope are great eating. They're fun to hunt. There's lots of them around. Same type of situation. We'd probably hunt something that's low stress, and those are also fairly easily attainable tags to get. And so we'd make sure you're qualified to get those tags with, like say, the hunter safety requirement. And yeah, I mean, through my business, I can apply and apply for you for a tag. So I just would email you a link basically, and you'd fill out the fillable form and then send it back to me. And I'd apply for the tag for you. And if you get the tag, if you get drawn for it, I get in touch and say, hey, you got it. Let's set some dates. Let's go for it. But then obviously when you get out, we would go through a basic. We always have everybody shoot beforehand, like, hey, let's get your gun out. Let's make sure we're still zeroed. And that bullet hole, everybody needs to be watching that target while everybody's shooting. I generally don't watch the target. I stand back and I watch you. I watch you how you handle the gun, how you load the gun. If it looks like a foreign object in your hand, if you're kind of shaking and you're afraid of it, acting like you're not really sure of how it works. I mean, unfortunately, I've seen guys pull guns brand new out of the box, not sighted in, the scope's crooked on there, and you're like, oh boy, we have some work to do before we do anything, and we might go shoot a box of bullets out of that thing. We're going to go through the basics and we're going to make sure that number one, you're safe. Number two, you're proficient before we go into the.
Well, as we close out here, what would be your 1 to 2 minute sales pitch for your for your guiding company?
Oh man, heck, I don't know. There's a ton of good outfitters out there. Um, Man, I've hunted professionally my entire adult life, just about. I worked for the U.S. government as a government trapper for 5 years in Wyoming. Know the country like the back of my hand. My brother still currently works for the USDA there, and my great grandfather on my mom's side did the same thing. Professional hunter. My dad guided hunters. My wife's dad and her grandpa and his dad were outfitters on their side. I mean, it's kind of in our blood. That's what we do. That's what we enjoy doing. And I'm not really going to try to sell anybody on it other than if you want to come and spend a week seeing how we make our living and how we live our lives, then that's great. And I want to get to know people before they come out. I want to see if we jive personally before I don't want to have a personality conflict in the field, so I talk to everybody for half hour, maybe an hour on the initial the initial contact, just to make sure that we're all on the same page and that we can actually be friends. A lot of our clients become lifelong friends. I mean, we send Christmas cards and, Christmas presents, letters in the mail, all sorts of stuff. So it's a super fun business, it's a family run thing, I mean, my wife's in camp just about every day, she's cooking, she's cleaning, she's taking care of our little boy now. And they're going to be in camp. And so if you want to come and, live the way we live with our family and, disconnect a little bit from the rest of the world, then come on out, let's have a good time.